Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Melton, back with Guy McPherson and also with Wolf, who will be helping us set the stage for this talk, which is about the Good Grief workshop that we did in Ashland, Oregon, here in October 2014. So, Wolf, lead us in to the vibe. Hey. Yeah, so we take the beyond science is where we go with the grief recovery workshop. And we did this one in Ashland and want to share with you about that on this, because this is where it's going. The science is becoming so obvious to so many people that when we do presentations, the science part is a half hour, 45 minutes. And then we are into what does it feel like and who are we becoming? And tell us about your experience with that, Guy.
Yes, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't even know what grief was until January of 2014, just a few months ago. I had no understanding of it. We're such a grief-denying culture. We just push it away. We have all these myths in this culture associated with grief. Grieve alone. If you're going to cry, I don't want to see it. Here, have a cookie. Something to distract you. We do all those sorts of things, but they manifest themselves in horrible ways. So when I was becoming certified with the Grief Recovery Institute, there were two women there who had recently had children die. And they heard time and time again something like, "Oh, that's horrible. At least you're young enough to have another." As if they're completely replaceable.
Right.
And I heard that hundreds of times when my first dog died as an adult. People say, "Oh, well, are you going to get another?" You know, as if these are all cogs. And so we're trying to go beyond the science because 5 million people a year die early deaths because of climate change. We have clearly triggered abrupt climate change. The evidence is out there in the wide open at this point. 2 billion people a day are going hungry. There are things to grieve right now. And then there's also anticipatory grief. We realize from the time we're 5 or 10 or 12 years old that we're going to die too, that mortality applies to us, that birth is in fact lethal for all of us. And so there's anticipatory grief, which is best described when somebody has a grandmother who is in the final stages of her life, for example. And so we're mourning that because we know she doesn't have long on the planet. So the grief recovery process is one that taps into the science a little bit, but then goes well beyond the science.
Yeah, and really, in experiencing it, and Wolf, I'd like you to chime in too, because we had a chance to tie in the Native American, the sounds, just all the different angles. And tell us a little bit from your side, Wolf.
People were feeling a whole range of emotion, from joyous to despair, and in and out, and that, I think, is the grieving process.
And there's even anger. People expressed serious anger, mostly, of course, targeted at the messenger, meaning me. And so I tried to tell them that Peter was the messenger, not me, but that didn't work either. And so there are this wide range of emotions associated with grief. How do we get beyond that and start pursuing joy again?
Yeah, and didn't you feel... We sat, well, it's now been 12 days in a row that we've been on tour, and every single day at these events, people go through this range of feelings, but almost entirely, anybody who we get to stay with for a little bit says, "I'm so glad that I came."
Right.
That, yes, it's terrible to hear, and yes, it breaks my heart open to grasp the possibility, probability, likelihood that things are going to get really bad. But when that heart comes open, much like opening your heart to love or some other expression, when you open your heart to the reality of the situation, that there's wisdom there, there's love there, there's people come around and say, "Oh my God, I was so angry yesterday, but now I sat with it and I realized that I did want to know the truth. I did want to know this perspective. And now I feel better. I feel alive. The closing round, when people share what they're sharing.
And as I've said before, it becomes not about the date, but about how I live today, how I pursue excellence in my life, how I pursue love in my life. And if we can just push away the scientific details, really, and pursue what is important to us in service to others and to the living planet.
Right.
I think that's really a big part of the message, and people come away with that part of the message.
Right.
That how do I live today?
Right. And they come to realize that grief is good. Thus, this title of Good Grief. It really, people associate grief with pain. I'm learning just about grief myself a lot for my world, but a lot of times people, oh, I'm in such grief about this. It's like, no, you're in such pain about that because you're feeling the loss. But what grief does, grief is our ability to love, to realize that it's love that's causing the pain, and that it's love that can move the energy, and love that then leaves you with this place that says, wait, yes, it's really bad and we're going to die. But we've known that for forever. But what that means is we get to live. I get to live today. Urgency, excellence, hooray, connection, presence, all comes from these conversations in this workshop, to where, bar none, on the reports afterwards, people were happy that they came and went through it.
And one of the analogies I like to use with respect to grief is sometimes we experience physical trauma and we're left with shrapnel in our flesh, or a sliver in our flesh, or we stepped on a rusty nail and it's buried deep in there, and you don't just put a Band-Aid on that and move along. No, this is going to hurt, but we're going to have to get to the root of that issue. We're going to have to dig that out, and it's going to be painful. And it's the same thing emotionally. When you're dealing with grief, you want to go deep. You want to dig around in there and clean that out and expose it to the light of day, and then let the true healing process begin, so that that irritant that is within you gets brought out.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned flesh, because I think we all felt in our skins, we felt in our heart, we felt in our gut, and with our largest feeling organ, we felt back in our skins again.
Yeah, and we had these incredible partners here in Ashland. Bill Kauth, who helped to launch the Mankind Project way back in the 70s, one of the grandfathers of the men's movement, and Jack Weens, who's a grief recovery counselor and counselor of all kinds here in Ashland, who helped us craft this program over just an evening and then a 9 to 3 day, to where people went through it experientially and got to share with each other and got to share with the group and got to go through it.
Right. And it was a wonderful experience for all of us.
Yeah.
We all came away energized. A quick summary at the end, 1 minute each, and one of the 20 people there mentioned that they were depressed, but felt so much better than they had a few days earlier. The other 19 people indicated no depression, indicated inspiration, indicated joy, indicated an urgency in the way they live. That's what we're looking for.
Right. And
Closets depressives felt better.
Yeah.
Right.
And we know that there'll be waves. It's obviously there's a seminar high that happens and people will go through their ups and downs, but now they have a framework and new people to connect with that will help them with this process.
Right. And that process, the ability to go through it, and the people. Those are both really critical.
Right. So we strongly help and create a follow-up community in the places that we go, and it's feeling just terrific, and we'll be sharing more on this topic. So stay tuned and watch out for grief recovery and good grief workshops coming to a town near you.